Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on whether you're watching us live or you're watching a recording, and also depending on your time zone. This is Cyberbullying Talks. My name is Tito de Moraes. I'm one of the organizers of these Thursday live streams. And today we will be approaching an interesting topic that with sextortion. We'll go to it in a moment. Let me just tell you that I'm speaking from Portugal, from a small city in the surrounding areas of the city of Porto, which is Portugal's second largest city. So feel free to leave us the comment in the comments where you are seeing us, where you are following us from. It's always nice to know where our viewers are. As usual, I'm not alone in these live streams. With me is Sónia Seixas. Hi, Sónia. How are you? You can unmute yourself.
Yes. Hi, Tito.
Okay.
I'm fine. I'm from Santarém, Portugal also.
Exactly. Just to give you, for those of us that don't, for those who don't know us, Sónia and my friend, our friend Luís Fernandes, is the author of Planned Bullying: How to Erase Bullying from School. They've also written another book called Say No to Bullying, Don't Let Them Hurt You. And the three of us wrote this book, Cyberbullying, a Guide for Parents and Educators, that was published in Portugal in 2016. And actually, we celebrated the 5th anniversary yesterday. So it's been already quite some time. We've also written a chapter for this book, Bullying Perspectives, Practice and Insights, which was published by the Council of Europe. We already have several people following us. Let us say hi. António João Silva is with us, says boa noite or good night. As you notice, today we are speaking in English. That means we will have an English-speaking guest. Abílio Carvalho is also a regular, says good night from beautiful town of Vila Nova de Gaia, which is right across the river from where I am. And Valeria Reani. Hello, Valeria. Says hi, everybody. And Valeria is following us from Brazil. So today we're going to talk about sextortion. During this live session, we'll discuss everything related to sextortion, from what it is to how it works, what are the risks and challenges. And our guest will share her knowledge from years of investigative experience within social networks, and we'll talk about her first novel, More Pixs. This award-winning sextortion thriller was published last year in 2020, and she's already working on her next novel to be published later this year. So let's welcome our guest. Hi, Muriel. Salut.
Hi.
Bonsoir.
Hi,
good evening.
Hi, Sónia. Actually, not bonsoir, not good evening. I'm in California, so it's the middle of the day here.
Okay. So it's around lunchtime there. Okay.
It is.
Okay. We also have Maria Leonor Silva with us. She says boa noite from Almada, which means good evening from Almada. Almada is right across the river Tejo, in front of Lisbon, basically. So it's further south than where we are. And people will be joining us. If you have any questions for our guest, feel free to leave them in the comments. We are broadcasting to Facebook, to Twitter, YouTube, and also to LinkedIn. Muriel, maybe we should start by letting us know and let our viewers know who you are. A French in America, which usually is the opposite, is an American in Paris, but not in this case.
Yes, absolutely. But first, let me just say thank you, Tito, for inviting me to join you guys today, because I watched all of yours and Sonia's video. I mean, the ones in English and in French, because my Portuguese is inexistent, I think is the word. And I'm really, really honored and excited to be with you and to be one of your guests. So who am I? Well, I'm a French writer. That's actually not correct. I'm French and I'm a writer, but I write primarily in English, even though it's my second language. I mean, you can hear the accent. It's not native at all. But yeah, so I'm a French writing in English, and I'm also a trust and safety expert with a focus on child safety. And so I bring the two of them together, and I actually write novels on the topic of child safety.
Very interesting, very interesting. Let me just before handing out to Sónia, to say that Natália Pestana says good night from Projeto Safe Web. She's based in Aveiro, which is known as to be the Venice from Portugal. Which is some 60 kilometers from the place where I am, and she's running also an internet safety project. So good evening, Natalia. Sónia, before handing out to you, let me just tell our viewers that I got to know Muriel in 2015. I was invited to attend a summit in Dublin, a child safety summit. Okay. And that's when we met. She was working at Facebook at the time. And we kept in touch since then. So her background in trust and safety and in investigative investigations is based with social media. But Sónia, over to you.
Thank you. I was just wondering, because the sextortion is a very worrying topic at any age, I think, but mainly with young people. So we would like to know, Muriel, how and when did you got involved with this subject?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's a different subject, and actually, my background is in a very different field. I graduated from college in computer science and program management, and I started my career as a MATLAB programmer in a mathematical field in game theory in a university, and so really, really far away from what we are about to talk about today. Right? So I would say, I don't know how to say that, but it's a series of very fortunate events that brought me to this field. I joined Facebook in 2011. As Tito was saying, this is actually how we met. And I joined their law enforcement response team at the time. It's a team that handles legal requests that come from law enforcement authorities. And so I got to really see how malicious actors can use social media, and that includes child predators. So I stayed at Facebook for a long time, and I had many different roles there, and I was in different teams, but always within that security and integrity organization. And actually, I should probably end by mentioning that I left Facebook last summer, so after 9 years in the company. And so really today, I'm here to talk about my own opinions. I'm not representing Facebook, the company.
For sure. And interesting, I always thought that you had some background either in law or forensics, something like that, to be involved investigations.
So during my years at Facebook,
interesting.
yeah, I did do a diploma in cybercrime and European law in France remotely, just to learn more on the subject. But that is not what led me to it. It's actually the subject matter that led me to the education, rather than the opposite way.
Okay, interesting. And how come? So not nowadays that's no longer your work, and you found that by writing fiction, you could raise awareness for sextortion, and I'm imagining other types of crimes. How did you transition from working in a social media company to writing?
Yeah, so I left Facebook last summer, and after that, I just wanted to share my expertise and my knowledge. So I do it with companies for consulting, but really most of my efforts now are just reaching out to teenagers, to young adults, to parents, to like anybody who is actually willing to listen to me for my writing. So I wrote this first novel, More Pixs, that talks about sextortion. It's a thriller, and it had a pretty good, better than expected result. It actually got an award in a young adult category. So I'm guessing that people want to listen to this topic. It's something that we do not talk about. It's pretty much a taboo. And so I kept on going. And my second novel, Call Me Guapo, is actually also on the same subject, on sextortion.
Can we ask you to tell us a definition? How do you define sextortion?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So the term sextortion is really the combination of two words, sex and extortion, coming together. So it's a form of extortion or blackmail that is based on the threat to share sexually explicit images or videos in order to obtain something. Now there are different types of sextortion, and that is usually based on the motivation that is behind the blackmail. So for instance, you have financially motivated sextortion. So typically a blackmailer would obtain sexually explicit images or videos of their victim and then threaten them to share that content with their friends and family unless they send money. And so the threat would look like, if you don't send me $500 or 500 euros, whatever the currency, I will send the video that I have of you to your friends and family. Another type of sextortion or motivation would be more based on the actual content itself. So they obtain sexually explicit images or videos, and then they use this to threaten them in order to obtain even more. Those are the two types of sextortion that I'm going to be talking to you about today. But there is different motivations, other ones, like someone can demand to meet somebody in person for sexual purposes, just using that threat. Or even within an offline relationship, you can have one of the people threatening to share those images and videos unless their ex-partner comes back to the relationship. And actually, if that threat is executed, we fall under revenge porn. But to go back to those two different sextortion I was mentioning, so financially based and content-based sextortion, they have different characteristics. One of the main one being the targeted population. So with financially motivated sextortion, generally, not all the time, but most generally, the targeted population is actually adults. So we can speculate that, you know, if you want to request money, adults are more likely to have money and to have access to the means to send the money to the blackmailer, right? Now, looking at more the content-based extortion, well, I'm going to be very blunt here, but if somebody wants access to pornography, well, the internet is full of it. It's very easily accessible, right? Now, if a child predator wants to access sexually explicit content that is depicting children, we are talking about something completely different here. We're talking about illegal material. So child sexual abuse material or system being illegal, if a child predator wants access to newly generated material, well, one of the means that he can have is to sextort children. Absolutely, yes. So I can talk about sextortion for hours, but let me just add one more thing that I think is very important, and that's something that actually Sónia mentioned earlier, and that is that sextortion does not discriminate, right? Like I just mentioned how victims can be adults and can be children, but actually it doesn't even stop at that. Like it doesn't have border. It doesn't discriminate based on race, on gender, on age, on language, on sexual orientation, on anything. So really, at the end of the day, anybody can be a potential target for sextortion.
Nevertheless, Muriel, I think there are no difference between men and women.
Absolutely.
No?
I mean, the numbers are a little bit different, but we do see victims of sextortion that are either male or female. Yeah, absolutely. Both of them.
I was looking at the Europol report of 2017, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about sextortion and definitions, and it seems that women may be more. It seems to be a difference between cases of the sextortions in women, and it refers to sexually explicit material, blackmail, for that motivation you said. Yeah. And in males, there are a tendency, I think, to be more blackmailed for financial gain. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I tend to agree. So for financially based sextortion, my experience, I see more victims that are male and adults. Now, because women are more interested in romance rather than just going online and showing themselves and then being blackmailed. However, for children, so more like the content-based extortion, my experience is also that I see more female children being sextorted. However, I did see many boys as well. I don't think it is one or the other. For children, I saw both. Yeah.
Okay. I have questions, but before, let's see comments here. We have Luís Fernandes from Beja. He's our co-author of the book. Usually he alternates with Sónia. Luís usually is on the Portuguese lives and Sónia on the English ones. And Valeria is saying that sextortion is a big problem in Brazil, and particularly with all age with women. And that brings me a question, which is, it's three things. One is that men are also sextorted. Many times they think that they are talking to a woman, and they are trapped into perform sexual acts to the camera, and those are recorded, and they are then victims of blackmail. The second one is that many times these situations are with people, there are criminal networks involved in this. Sometimes people say that they have pictures that they don't have, and the person is afraid and buckles and provides to the blackmailist. And one that I would like to mention is I think it was the IWF Internet Watch Foundation that mentioned that they've seen children as young as 7 years old falling victim of sextortion. Can you comment on these three topics?
Yeah, I would just say that this is completely what my experience is. I can just agree with everything that you said. Those two first topics actually are the subject of my second novel, which really talks about financially motivated sextortion and men as the victims. As young as 7, yes, I am absolutely not surprised. I mean, we know that under 13 years old should not be on platforms. However, lying about your age is unfortunately so easy.
Can I just ask you something? I was still thinking about something you said earlier. It's very interesting, this question that you talked about romanticism in women. Do you think that puts them at a greater risk of sextortion?
Women.
Yes. Because they are more romantic, because they are more willing to connect with others, and they expect different intimacy, I think. So maybe they are at a greater risk. I was just wondering, because when you talked about romanticism in women, a trace that might put them at a greater risk. I don't know if I'm...
Yeah, I think it might put them at a greater risk for extortion, like to get them to send money for different reasons, because somebody is pretending that they need money for whatever reason, and because they fell into this romance scam, they might send it. But for sextortion, so really having this component of blackmail based on sexually explicit material, I do not think so. I mean, at the end of the day, most of the victims of financially motivated sextortion that I've seen are men, not women.
Okay. Tito, can you ask something about experience investigation?
Yes. You were saying that most of the victims that you see in extortion financially motivated cases are men. Okay. Can you talk about your experience in investigating cases? Can you give us some insights on how children can find themselves victims of sextortion?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a question that parents tend to ask me. They usually have a hard time to imagine that their child could fall for sextortion, because it sounds so crazy that a kid would be sending pictures of themselves to adults. So I don't know if you are familiar with this concept of this term of stranger danger, but you are certainly familiar with the concept behind it, because parents have been using it for generations to talk to their kids. And basically, it's this idea of talking to your kid about an adult that may come to the playground and offer you some sweets. Right, and they warn about this. We've all heard about it, and so in English they have this stranger danger term, which I like. It's very catchy. That said, it's a concept that if you try to translate it to the online world, it's really hard, because at the end of the day, if a child predator tries to approach children in order to sextort them, they are not going to appear as they actually are as adults, right? They are going to use deception, deceptive behavior, and also deceptive content. So they will pretend to be children themselves and create fake accounts for this, or they will pretend to be a fake modeling agency and to be an agent of that agency to be able to approach the children and based on that deception, they will create this trust-based relationship. And that's just grooming, right? And then once that relationship is in place, then there might be a first exchange of CSAM. And really, all what it takes is just one picture for the fights to begin and for them to just ask for more. Now, this is a generalization, right? This is most of what I've seen, but I think we should be very cautious about using generalization, because child predators have an adversarial mindset. They will always come up with new ways and different ways to approach children. So let me give you an example that is an actual case I worked on years ago, and that does not fall into that generalization that I just made. So it was a sextortion case from years ago. The sextortionist was in the United States, even though it doesn't make any difference where he was. But he was betting on that simple fact that back then, and I'm talking about 2016, 2015, so this number has changed and actually gone up. But back then, 12% of teenagers had already sent a sexually explicit image before he was approaching them. So he would just approach them, those children, and say very simple words. Hi, I have to ask you something kind of important. How many guys have you sent dirty pics to? Because I have some of yours. And that, because those children had maybe already been sending a picture in the past, put some doubt into their mind. And that was enough for 375 victims to actually fall into that sextortion and send sexually explicit images and videos, even though at the end of the day, in most cases, that sextortionist didn't even have the content to start with. It was just a threat out of thin air, but they fell for it. Because I think it's a very powerful weapon, this threat to shame someone, right? Because those children, they may be having fear to be punished or judged or bullied. And so they will comply. And sadly, it really worked for hundreds of children, which is crazy.
So basically, the sextortion starts with a tricky maneuver to trick the child, and he presents himself as the nice guy that is warning the child that you send these images to too many people and you've lost control of the pictures. So actually resembles the idea that I had, that tricking people, like with how you call it, phishing emails, for instance, for men or for adults, because they probably have those images on their computers or laptops or whatever, and they might be thinking that their computer has been compromised and that person has those pictures, and they don't. They just throwing it into the dark to see whether it sticks or not. That's really interesting. Sónia, maybe we should introduce the question regarding the.
I would like
book.
to yes, but let me just say that this idea of a stranger being able to generate a feeling of familiarity in the virtual world, I think it's a frightening idea for our kids, for the youngsters, but it's true. But we would like to ask you about your book. If the 5 More Pixs is based on real cases. that you have investigated? We must ask that.
Yes, no, yes, you must ask, but yes is not my answer. So no, it's not based on a real case that I investigated. I mean, somehow it is. God, it's a very complicated question. So let me say, let me say that the short answer is no. It's not based on any case. Five More Pixs is telling the stories of 3 Californian girls that fall for sextortion. Their stories are completely fictional. Those 3 girls do not exist. And I will even tell you that the apps that I mentioned in the books are completely out of my imagination. So there is no Facebook, no TikTok, no Snapchat, no Instagram, like you name it. Like none of this app is mentioned in the book. They are all fictional. And the reason behind this is because I did not want to associate the crime of sextortion with a specific app. You know, I think that the digital world change all the time. The apps that we were using yesterday are not the ones that we are using today. They are not the ones that we are going to be using tomorrow. I mean, I'm extrapolating, but you know what I'm trying to say. And so I wanted to talk about really a generalization so that tomorrow, even though there is new apps, we're still cautious about sextortion. And I think that if you have a product that has a messaging component, it is pretty certain that sextortion is happening there. And if a company were to deny this, well, I would just challenge them to look better. So, of course, platforms that enable victims discovery, and I'm talking about social media platforms or online gaming platforms, they are more likely to attract sextortionists because that's where they can easily find potential victims. But this crime very often happens on more than one platform. It starts somewhere and then the conversation goes somewhere else. So really, I don't think that any app is an exception. Now, I did say that somehow it is based on a real case, and that's because, you know, I was an investigator for child safety for several years, and most of the work I did at the time was around sextortion. So obviously, at the end of the day, the book is based on my experience, and it's very realistic. I actually put a trigger warning at the beginning of the novel because it talks about sextortion. So it talks about child abuse. It talks about suicide, about eating disorders. It's very hard to read. I mean, at the minimum, it's uncomfortable. Yeah, at the very least, uncomfortable.
Okay. We've been talking about sextortion, but I have two questions that I would like to give. Usually sextortion starts with sexting. Somebody is sexting, and as a result of sexting, it becomes sextortion. Is there such thing as safe sexting?
Oh God, I don't know if I'm really in a position to answer this question. I mean, the exchange of sexting, of like sexually explicit images amongst teenagers, even with consent, is illegal, right? It's the material itself is illegal. So, is there safe sexting? Well, my personal opinion would be no. I mean, look at revenge porn. This starts in a consensual relationship, right? Two people who love each other, and then it goes towards like the most nightmare of outcomes. But again, when you are in a loving relationship, you do trust your partner, and you can never really see that coming. So, yeah, tricky one here, Tito.
Yeah, I asked the question because sometimes I see articles with titles like 10 ways to sext safely and things like that. And I think that while I understand sexting as a part of someone's sexuality, I think that it's a high risk behavior, because so many things can go wrong that it's hard to control all of them. I can lose my device. My device can be stolen. Somebody can have access to it inadvertently. I can be the victim of an intrusion. So there are solutions for all those. Okay, I can keep the images encrypted and stuff like that, but it becomes increasingly complex to do it in a safe way. That I think that's a really risky behavior. But I asked you because you worked in investigations, and you was interested in learning about your
and especially
views on that.
You know, Tito, you just mentioned that there are ways to make sure that you have control over those images, but sexting actually involves two people, all right?
Yeah.
At the minimum, right? So you do not have control over those images anymore once they are they are in possession of that second person. I think one of the most important thing I would say, though, is that what is really important is to just keep the conversation open, especially with teenagers, about sexting, and to emphasize that they will not be judged or punished whatever happens. You know, you really want to make sure that the communication is open, and that if things go wrong, they come to you.
Interesting that Jason Mahoney is commenting, and hi Jason, and thank you for watching. He says that you and I imagine me, is perceiving this from an adult perspective, and you're right. And says that also media activity encourages the act. And adds that OnlyFans has also monetized the content. And actually, during the following lives that we'll be hosting every Thursdays on this channel, and on Tuesdays on the Internet Safety project that I run, we'll be addressing issues that have to do with sextortion, with revenge porn, with sexting. So keep an eye, because we'll be approaching these topics in the following sessions. But do you want to comment on Jason Mahoney when he says that the media activity encourages the act? And I have to agree with him. I mean, nowadays we take pictures of everything, from our food to the amount of pictures that we take daily is, I mean, so I would say yes, but I would love to know what you think about his comments.
I
that
agree
we're perceiving
with you,
this an adult perspective, that the media encourage the act. And it's even become more complex now that children can monetize, children and youth can monetize their nudity.
Yeah, and you know, I also have the adult perspective here. I'm far away from being a teenager myself, and I'm really grateful somehow that I was born like so many years ago, and we did not have smartphones or social media or anything like this, right? But I think it's beyond media encouraging this. I think society does as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree.
Yeah. So, Jason, we agree with you. Our perspective is obviously an adult perspective. And who knows, if we were 13, 14, or 15, maybe we'd be sexting and falling for these sorts of situation. But once again, thank you for watching, and would love to see you more often around. So that goes into, let's move to the beginning, to the first question. I had the two questions, and the other one is sextortion the right word? Because sometimes I was speaking with another guest and for another show, and she was telling me that words matter. And do you think sextortion is the right expression for this type of behavior or crime, because it is a crime? Or we should be talking, instead of sextortion, we should be talking about sexual coercion and extortion? Calling the things by their names.
In one hand, because I've been working on that subject matter for so many years, and it's been 10 years, I'm so familiar with the term sextortion. To me, it's part of my vocabulary. It's really hard to imagine saying something else. I also think that, and that goes back to Sonia's question earlier regarding how I define sextortion. I think the term is very self-explanatory, right? The combination of extortion with this sexual component. Also, I think that this needs to be something that is not just talked in our community of professionals in the online safety subject. And if you want children to catch that word and parents to be able to talk to their kids, the word that you were using earlier, I forgot, the sexual coercion. I think it's too complex. I think we need to keep the vocabulary very accessible to make it an easy one to talk about.
That's true. I was asking this question because that's the term, the expression that Europol suggests to be used instead of sextortion. And we have similar situations with revenge porn. People are saying that sexual violence based on intimate images is a more accurate description, because revenge porn doesn't always involve revenge acts. And also the same with child pornography. The term child pornography, people are using child sexual abuse material. So that's why I was asking. Jason adds, still regarding the comments that we were making, that we sometimes forget that the perception of the world is based on our past experiences. And he says that he would call it a modern grooming behavior. But I don't know whether grooming takes a part usually in the beginning, but the Sextortion Act in itself doesn't always involve grooming, I think. And he had sexual exploitation is a more comprehensible term. Okay. So next question would be, by your next novel. So it's going to be Call Me Guapo, which will be published this year. Is also a sextortion novel. Why this focus on sextortion, and how will it be different from the previous book?
Yes. So
I have a hint. Can you confirm? Because when you say "call me guapo," probably the victim is a male.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, you're totally correct. but I will not talk more about the title because it has hints in there that I want the reader to discover through the novel itself. So
I'm sorry, I didn't want to be a spoiler.
No, that's not what I meant. So yes, Call Me Guapo is also about sextortion. You know, Five More Pixs is a novel that talks about content-based extortion. So blackmailer who is trying to get more sexually explicit content from the victims. Call Me Guapo is financially motivated sextortion.
Wow.
So the other one that we talked about earlier with the victims being adults. Yes, and so that confirms what Tito was saying about the victim being victim male. Absolutely. Now, why the focus on sextortion in general with my writing? I worked as a child safety investigator for years, like I said, and most of the work I did then was related to sextortion. And what I can tell you is that the stories of those victims are heartbreaking. The crime is awful. It's terrible. Adults or children being victims. It's absolutely brutal. And I just talked about the stories of the victims. So now in our space, we usually like to, again, talking about words and the choice of words, we like to talk about survivors rather than victims. Mm-hmm. And I chose this word. It's a very conscious decision because not all victims of sextortion are actually survivors. I don't think we should neglect the risk of suicide amongst victims of sextortion. I mean, the most infamous story of sextortion is the story of Amanda Todd, who committed suicide. Sadly, she's not the only one. Many other children and adults have committed suicide as a result of sextortion. Now, one other thing that really stuck with me in all those years is how many of the victims actually report the crime. And that's, spoiler alert, it's just too little. There was a survey that was made by Tronc a few years ago, and they interviewed survivors of sextortion. And what they found out was really worrying. I mean, a third of those victims at the time of the survey had still not been talking about the abuse that happened to them to anyone. The numbers were like 16% of the victims, I think, went to law enforcement. 16%. That's just way too little. A sextortion case usually has dozens or even hundreds, like I was mentioning with the other case earlier, of victims. And you need at least one of those victims to go to law enforcement to report the abuse on the platforms for all of the others to be safe, to be safeguarded, right? And so I wondered how I could raise more awareness. I mean, I have so many knowledge and expertise, unfortunately, somehow on the subject. How could I share all of this? And so I reflected back to, myself as a teenager. Again, no social media, no smartphone, but still, I was an avid reader back then, still am, and I do believe that a lot of people still read, including children, including adults, parents, and so that's just how it came to me to write about sextortion, and I will write about it until I have nothing else to say.
Very interesting points that you made there. And I'll go back to them in a minute, just to say that Jason is adding that threat and fear was always a grooming tactic online and offline. So that grooming is most probably also always involved in sextortion cases. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the lack of reports. People don't report it to proper authorities, and in the case of children, even to their parents, they don't ask for help usually, and usually on the the events that I participate as a speaker, when we talk about social engineering, that's one of the things that I remind people. It only takes a criminal to make me do something that is socially unacceptable or censorable, or commit a very small legal act that will put me in a position of not reporting him, because if I report him, I'm afraid that he will report me as well, because I've done something that I wasn't supposed to, or I did something that I shouldn't have done. That's called the principle of illegality. Some people call it also the principle of infraction, and that's the reason why there are some types of crimes that have what they call dark numbers that go unreported. In the case of children, there's even an additional situation, which is usually parents tell their children, don't talk to strangers online. But that's also one of the wonderful things of the internet, is meeting people, meeting new people, making new acquaintances that can become friends, meeting people that have the same interests that we have, that like the same things, and so forth. So usually children tend to break that recommendation. So the proper recommendation should not be don't talk with strangers, but mostly don't talk about sex with strangers, because that's increasing the risk of falling victim. So I would like you to comment on this. And on another thing, some situations that I've come across, people, children, they don't send nudes. They just send sexually suggestive pictures. And that can be in a bikini, posing, or something like that. They are not nudes, but they are used because they've taken and provided those pictures. Then they are used as a blackmailing tool. Have you come across instances like that?
All right, so 2 questions. The first one was, and tell me if I got this right, rather than telling not to talk to stranger, it's more about not sending, not sexting with stranger, right? Not sending images. So,
or messages, not exchanging sexual messages with
sexual
strangers,
messages,
because that's a real risky
not share
situation.
How is that?
Content, yes.
Yes, but if you put a child in a playground outside, at the end of the day, they will have friends. Those friends are not strangers, right? You put the child on the internet. At the end of the day, they will think that they have friends, that those friends are children as well. And those are not strangers anymore to them. So not sending sexual messages is more complex than this to strangers, because in the eyes of those kids, we're not talking about strangers. We're talking about other teenagers, right? So, yeah, I guess there is really this need of talking to children about the fact that not everybody that you meet online is who they think they are, and they are deceptive behavior and deceptive content that is really good. Sometimes you as a parent may look at the friends of your child and actually do think that all of those friends are children themselves, because they have pictures and they have interests that are aligned with those of your children. But that is all part of the grooming behavior. And sorry, I forgot the second question now. Yes.
The second question, pictures that are not really nudes are just sexually suggestive, and they can be used as a blackmailing tool nevertheless.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I've seen it. And that's because at the end of the day, it's the same. You're still using the threat to shame them. the fact that they are nudes or not doesn't change anything. I've seen instances where I told you where they were not even pictures to start with. It was just a fight out of thin air. I've seen things where there were no pictures at all. It was just sexual messages and the threat to send a copy of those conversations to the parents. And none of the children wants their sexting, even if it's just messages and no pictures, to go to mom and dad.
Absolutely. I understand. Sónia, do you want to make us the next question?
We have been talking about the current state of this situation, but we would like to know, just for curiosity, what do you think will happen in the next 3 or 5 years from the future?
And I'm conscious about time. This is gonna be a hard one to squeeze in a few minutes. I think
Don't
Sextortion...
worry. On our side, we have all the time.
Okay.
On our side, we have all the time.
I know it's really late, so I really appreciate that.
We begin at time, but we end when.
So I think sextortion is not going away, and definitely not in the next 3 to 5 years. I would love to be wrong. I would love one of the two of you to ping me in 5 years, send me a message and be like, guess what? You were wrong. And that's fine. Like drinks are on me that day. I swear to God. But yeah, I don't think it's gonna disappear, and I'm actually really worried that it may get worse. I think we are entering a time where there is gonna be more and more private communications. There is a need for privacy. Private sector and public sector, both of them are coming up with a lot of privacy initiatives that are necessary. We do need privacy laws. This is controversial, but I think we do need end-to-end encryption in communications. I'm a fervent pro privacy initiatives like encryption. But I also do think we need to have those implemented in a way that is not putting children at risk and their safety. So, I think that for a long time, we did not know what was going to happen once some of those initiatives were going to be put in place. Crazily, now we do. There was this initiative that I know you're very familiar with, because I saw a talk a few weeks ago, or a month ago. I was talking about touching on this, the e-privacy directive that Europe put in place last year. And the result was there. NECMEC reported after 6 weeks of the e-privacy directive being put in place, a decrease of over 50% of the reports of child exploitation coming from Europe. And that was as the result very likely of not because there were no child exploitation instances anymore in Europe, but because a lot of companies have stopped using the technology to surface it as a direct result of the e-privacy directive. And so that is extremely worrying, because we are talking about putting this to the scale of the world once we have things like end-to-end encryption or some privacy laws being also implemented. So now, obviously, it's not an easy problem. I do not personally have a solution to present to you today, otherwise the whole talk would be about that. And it is a hard problem, but I don't think it's an impossible one. But I think it's necessary that we solve for both privacy and safety. They are both necessary. At the end of the day, we talk a lot about the safety of the children, right, between us. But what about their privacy? I went to the sentencing of a sextortionist last month, and the prosecutor in that case, wonderful, so smart woman, she said something that really stuck with me after the day, and this was about the privacy of the victims of that sextortionist. What about all of those images and videos of those kids that are now on the internet, right? Like, who is actually protecting the privacy of those children? And so I really think that we need to solve for both. We need safety advocates and privacy advocates to work together, because at the end of the day, right now, the conversation is extremely polarized. You have safety pro safety on one side, and safety pro safety on one side, pro privacy on the other. But it needs to be a joint conversation. It needs to be a joint solution. So yeah, again, not an easy one, but definitely not an impossible problem to solve for. And I think we will be really underestimating humanity if we think that we cannot resolve this.
Okay. Regarding trends, we're seeing that children younger and younger are falling victim from sextortion situations. And since seniors are the fast growing segment of the population joining the internet, do you think there will be the next wave of sextortion victims?
Oh, that's
senior citizens?
That's a very interesting question. Probably more
Because
for
the
financially
internet is a
motivated
tool for a
sextortion.
senior.
Yeah.
Just maybe because the internet is a means for a senior to connect to the world, to make new acquaintances, to break their isolation.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that can be a situation. I would like your feedback on that.
Yeah, I think you're making a very interesting point. I never heard about this, but yeah, absolutely. Why not? If more senior people come online, I could definitely see a rise of financially based extortion, because again, that's where the money is. That's where they have the means to actually send money to blackmailer. Obviously, I think we're talking about financially based extortion when talking about more senior people. But yeah, it makes absolute sense.
Because, for instance, there is already situations which is romance scams coming out from African countries, for instance, to French women that are that have reformado, how do you say, have retired. And they are basically stripped of their retirement money. So I'm thinking, okay, being old doesn't mean that people don't have a sexual life; they still do. So perhaps that can help. That can happen. And the other one is the proliferation, or not the proliferation, but deep fakes will become easier and easier to make. So do you think that we can fall victims of non-existent sexual content? I'll give you an example. A video of me performing a sexual act that I have never performed. It's a deep fake. Okay. But I look at it and I can't believe my eyes, because everybody's going to believe it's me.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way the technology is going, it's going to be even just more and more realistic, right? And it's something that we've seen even in the past with photoshopped images of, especially with women, of them being associated the face of a woman with a naked body, not being even their body. And even though it was very obvious that it was photoshopped, that again is enough to put this threat to shame and to get them to do whatever the person wants. So you're absolutely right, Tito. I think the technology is just going to make things worse, unfortunately.
Yeah. Actually, in Portugal, some years ago, we had the case of an actress that there was a porn video circulated, and the porn actress was similar to this actress, but it's not. It was not her video, and it was obvious. But it really leaves. It's traumatic. It's a really traumatic event. Even if people know that it's not her, but some people will claim that it is. Well, Jason has been active commenting. Let me pay some attention to his comments. It says, in Ireland, many adult victims never come forward. This is a link to a male who committed suicide after paying the ransom, yet the content was published. We can also neglect the impact of the halo effect on children. It's a very powerful influencing factor. I have to check that out, halo effect, because I don't know what you're talking about, Jason. I have to bring myself up to speed. And Jason also says, unless tech is restricted for children, things will get progressively worse. At the moment in the UK, 50% of are admitting to sexting. That is a really high percentage. Privacy initiatives will afford sexual predators will be empowered, meaning I'm guessing that the use of cryptography that will consume a series of live streams, Jason. I'm sure, because it's a really hot topic. In my opinion, we have, as I do afford perception of the act they engage into children. I teach kids a really simple message, or it was like to go sexting in the 1990s. You get your camera, take a picture, and then bring it to the developing lab. Yes, and now 2 weeks later you have the copy, the printed photograph. That's true. That's how sexting was.
God, if you remember how to take a selfie with an actual camera, oh my God, this is not.
Exactly. Okay, thank you for that comment, Jason. You made us laugh. Well, we already gone over the so in order to finalize, I would like to ask you to give our listeners, they are mostly parents, educators, and professionals that work with children, some tip, recommendation, or advice that you'd like to give them. But before you do, let me just say that which are the following live streams that we'll be having. On the 27th, we'll be live streaming from the Kids Safe on the Net channel, Miúdos na Net, and we'll be talking in Portuguese with some researchers that have made a study on non-consensual sexting in adolescence, or abusive sexting. So that's Tuesday, 9:30 Portuguese time. And then on the 29th, we'll be having Inês B. Marinho. She's the founder of a movement called Don't Share It. And it is a movement to prevent the sharing of violent, abusive images, things like revenge porn and materials like that. So these are the ones that we have lined up for next week, but we have already lined up more speakers for May and also for June. Before you give your answer, let me tell you that Jason says, you come back, the guy in the shop wants you to get your photos instead of someone else's, so he has to look through them. Cops are probably outside already asking why you took those sort of pics, but you end up with them in your hand. The question I ask kids, then is, who on this planet would you trust with this picture? Yeah. And everyone says nobody. So Abílio Carvalho is also saying that today there were no questions. Just the pleasure of listening. Excellent live. Abílio is a regular. I think he never misses a show that we have, and we are thankful for having people like Abílio and António João Silva also following us, saying great session. So let's give us your advice for parents, teachers, and professionals that work with children.
Right, and thank you for the comments. This was enlightening to listen to this scenario of the 90s. I absolutely loved it. All right, so some insights for parents and teachers. Well, the first one, I would say, educate yourself. I mean, everybody says that, but we really need parents to understand the apps that are used by their children, but not just how to use them, but also the reporting flows. How do you actually report abusive content or abusive accounts on a platform, and show their children how to do that? Secondly, I would say communicate, and that goes together. And I say that because, well, one easy way to talk to children about online safety is just, ask them, how do you use the app? At the end of the day, children know how to use applications better than anyone. So if you want to learn how to use one of them, don't go for a tutorial online. Just go ask a child. They'll show you. And then ask them, have you ever seen something that made you uncomfortable? What did you do about it? Why didn't you tell me about it? And get to this point of the communication where they can feel that they can come and talk to you about anything without the fear of being judged or being punished, and talk about sextortion. It's not easy, it's probably uncomfortable and can be awkward, but it's important. So, obviously, I would encourage you to read my book to learn more about sextortion, and then you can decide if you are comfortable with your children reading it, or if you want to read it with them, or just talk about the subject with your child. But talk about sextortion, and actually. At the end of the novel, there is a link to an amazing video that was created by Tronc. It's on stopsextortion.com, and it's a cat video explaining sextortion. It's absolutely wonderful and an easy way to talk to children. The website is in English, but they have a Vimeo site that has, I have it somewhere, that has multiple languages of the video. So if you speak French with your kids, or Portuguese, or there is this.
There is a Portuguese version.
There is all the versions are there. It's absolutely amazing, and yes, talk to your kids about sextortion. And lastly, I would say, take care of yourself. Last month I got on a plane. And I know that a lot of people haven't been traveling because of COVID for probably over a year now. So let me just remind you of how that works. When the plane takes off, the flight attendant gives safety instructions, right? And they tell you about putting on a mask for oxygen, right? Now it's a bit different because you need to take off your surgical mask and then put on your oxygen mask, otherwise it doesn't work. But what they tell you is put on your own mask before attending to other people, including children. Because, if you pass out because you don't have oxygen, then how are you supposed to help anybody, right? And this works for anything. And I'm sorry, I know we are super over time, but there is something else that I'm going to mention, and this is not really for parents or teachers, but more for professionals that I know some of them are listening that work on the topic of child safety. It's been really hard this year. I mean, working on child safety is difficult to start with, but doing this at home in the middle of a pandemic, in sometimes complete isolation, can be really hard. So I will have just one advice for them, and it's to read an article that was written by one of my friends and ex-coworker on LinkedIn about working from home on child safety in the middle of a pandemic, by John Buckley. I'm putting him on the spot. He doesn't know about that, but it's a wonderful article with insights from someone who has worked on the subject for many years and has been working on it from home, and yeah, I would just say all of you need to look after yourself in the pandemic and COVID just have made it so much harder.
Absolutely. Let me just, I've already posted the comment that you made regarding this article. Let me just add that Jason has said, so why send a nude? Kids need perspective, experience we perceive they already have, yet they don't. And that's true. We tend to think that children, because they were born surrounded with technology, that they know everything about technology. They might know which buttons to hit, but they don't know that somebody can hit their buttons and put them into trouble. And he says, read the rest because you will see the message in the experience of the past. And if you can fit me in, Tito, I'd love to chat with you and your guests. Great broadcast. Cite me. Yes, I'll definitely reach out and will. Jason, thank you for commenting and being there. And Muriel, if there is anything else that you would like to add just before we close. It was a pleasure having you here and see you after all these years. We see on Twitter usually, but it's not the same thing. It was a pleasure to have you as a guest, and it was a lovely session. I loved it.
Yeah, me too. I'm really thankful that you invited me, and I had such a great time talking with the two of you, but also reading all the comments that came over time. It was really a great session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presence with us and for sharing your knowledge and for the final tips.
Thank you.
And you made me very concerned about the number of sextortion victims who do not report it. And I was thinking about the seniors, Tito. You made me wonder about it. So it was a very pleasant session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you everybody who was on that side, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or LinkedIn. So follow us every Thursday evening. It's not always in English. We have sometimes Portuguese guests, sometimes Brazilian guests, but once a month we try to fit in an English speaking guest. I think the next one will be, I don't know. But will be from also it will also be with a French accent. The next guest will be talking about technologies and artificial intelligence, but that will be in May, and I'll keep you posted. See you next Thursday, Muriel. Merci beaucoup. C'était un plaisir de te voir de nouveau.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.